This is the story of Karen's Goldfish, which I already know by heart because it gets retold in the recap section of pretty much every book that comes after this one.
Argofont Book Review, Argofont Book Review.
This book was written by Anne Martin. Andrew and Karen complain that they don't have their own pet at Dad's house. Karen uses all of her powers of emotional manipulation when asking Dad for a pet of her own. I would say no. It doesn't make sense to have a full-time pet for someone who's only here every other weekend. Besides, you know who else doesn't have a pet of their own? Christy, Charlie, Sam, Nanny, Elizabeth, and Emily Michelle. Dad is a pushover, so he agrees to get them some fish. David Michael's in charge of taking care of the fish whenever Karen isn't there. Andrew's fish is named Goldfishy. Karen's fish has a spot on its tail, and she names it Crystal Light. Karen obsesses over her fish. She calls twice every day to check in on it. She even forces Charlie to bring her to the house for a few minutes so she can look at the fish. Poor Charlie, the chauffeur. 1 week later, Crystal Light dies from unknown causes. Karen cries her eyes out, and she decides everything is David Michael's fault. He's a fish killer. Karen yells at him multiple times. There's a morbid section where Karen thinks Crystal Light is taking a nap, so she grabs the dead fish and puts it back in the tank. There's also a sad section where she dreams Crystal Light is still alive. She wakes up and cries when she realizes it's not true. In real life, Dad would flush the fish rather quickly, but the book needs him to preserve the body, so Karen can spend 7 chapters on the funeral. So he leaves the fish's corpse out in the kids' playroom for 4 days. That's gross and starts a nasty smell. Karen wears all black to school and makes a big deal over how sad she is. She invites everyone to the funeral, except David Michael, because he's a fish killer. Karen starts a dead fish fight with Christy and David Michael and Dad. Karen is so mean here, she gets sent to her room as punishment. Only it's not a real punishment because she was planning to spend a half hour in her room anyway. How lucky for her. Karen plans the funeral. She wants Christy to give a speech, and she struggles to think of a fish-related song to sing. She only knows 2 fish songs. I've never heard of either of them. I would suggest Baby Shark. Karen makes ideas for tombstones, including one that forever accuses David Michael of being a fish killer. When Karen's timeout is over, she doesn't apologize to anyone. Dad clearly wants her to apologize, but he doesn't tell her to apologize. So she doesn't. At the funeral, the kids do a bad job of singing, so Karen shout sings over all of them. Natalie Springer snorts, because she always snorts whenever she appears in these books. Afterwards, David Michael takes Karen to Morbida Destiny's house. She has a pond with a lot of goldfish. Morbida Destiny gives Karen a new fish, which looks exactly like Crystal Light. Karen worries this is some sort of weird witch magic, like maybe it's a zombie fish. But there's not enough time to fully develop this idea, because we're at the last chapter of the book. Karen names her new fish Crystal Light II, and she gives David Michael a half-hearted apology for being mean. The end. Post-book follow-up. Here's the Karen drinking game. Crystal Light's funeral was mostly an excuse for Karen to show off and get attention. The ending reminds me of the Simpsons episode, where their cat Snowball II dies. They get a replacement cat that looks just like the old one and has the exact same name. So all the people who missed that episode won't know the difference. It's the same way with Karen's Goldfish. I didn't like this book. It has a good premise. I don't mind seeing Karen deal with the loss of a beloved pet, even if that story is recycled from Babysitter's Club Book 11. I think the story would have worked well with Emily Jr., who's appeared in many of these books. Crystal Light's death has little impact because she's only 3 chapters old before she dies. Readers had no time to develop a connection to the fish, and indeed the funeral planning is longer than the fish's life by several chapters. Another problem is that there are too many jokes at the funeral. There's the joke of Natalie snorting and the joke of nobody singing correctly. Those jokes detract from the seriousness of the situation. Contrast that to the serious scene afterwards, where Karen and her friends stand at the grave in silence. Karen was exceptionally mean to David Michael throughout the entire book. I did not like seeing Karen be such a jerk, and I didn't think her apology at the end was good enough. In conclusion, I would improve the book by killing off Emily Jr. instead of Crystal Light. I would get rid of the jokes in the funeral section, and I'd have Karen be less terrible to David Michael. Then it would be a solid book all the way through, instead of having only one or two solid moments. I give Babysitter's Little Sister number 16, Karen's Goldfish, a thumbs down.